Forget it. I'll marry. The moment the words left my mouth, the ministers dropped to their knees, praising me for putting the greater good first. But no one knew I'd been waiting 8 years for the day I could marry the crown prince of an enemy kingdom. On the second night after the wedding, he finally stayed in my palace. We spent the night in each other's arms. I've heard the women of the Kingdom of Lin are reserved and obedient. You're nothing like them. I looked at him, his eyes dark with desire. I slid my arms around his neck and murmured, "Do you like that, Your Highness?" "Forget it, I'll marry." I pushed open the doors and strode into the hall. The clamor died instantly. Everyone turned to stare. The white-bearded old man at the front frowned the moment he saw me. I knew what he wanted to say, that women had no place meddling in affairs of state. But he couldn't say it, because I was here to save his life. My father, the emperor, sat high above us. He studied me for a long moment, as if he had to recall which princess I was. Then he said, "Luna, don't be ridiculous." I walked forward, one step at a time, and bowed. "Father, I'm not being ridiculous. Third sister is missing. The younger princesses are still too young. If I don't go, how will we answer to the Kingdom of Song?" He pressed his fingers to his brow and said nothing. All the ministers dropped to their knees and cried out, "The princess puts the greater good first. It is our great fortune." The emperor's mouth twitched. In the end, with the court pressing him, he agreed. They told him not to cling to me while ignoring the soldiers on the border and the millions of people. But I knew it wasn't that he couldn't bear to part with me. The Kingdom of Song demanded the most favored princess of our dynasty, and I just happened to be the least favored. Even my name had been chosen on a whim. He'd looked up, seen a full moon, and spoken it aloud. Once it was decided I would be sent to the Kingdom of Song, my treatment improved overnight, by several ranks. If I hadn't refused, they might even have moved me to another palace, all gold and splendor. When the emperor came, I was sitting in the sun with my dying cat in my arms. He crouched in front of me and reached out to pet it. "Don't touch him." I shielded the cat, snapping up my guard. Maybe no one had ever spoken to him like that. His hand hung in the air, then finally withdrew. Perhaps because I was about to sacrifice my entire life for the Kingdom of Lin, he didn't show anger at my disrespect. "Luna, it's going to die," he said, looking at the cat in my arms. I blinked, my voice unnaturally steady. "I know, even if it dies in my arms." Alive, it was my cat. Dead, it would still be my cat. No one else would touch it. In the end, the emperor sighed and stood. He looked around Jade Spring Palace. "Luna, it's too quiet here," he said at last. I smiled faintly and stroked the cat. "Thanks to you, father. I like it here." Thanks to him was true, and I did like it. My mother had died of illness in this palace. After that, Jade Spring Palace became like a cold palace. No one came, no one cared. We were left to wither on our own. Wasn't that thanks to him? When the emperor left, he ordered people to bring in a great many new things. I found it almost funny. In 2 days I would be gone. Bringing these things in now felt like staging a performance, and it was a performance. This show of favor was meant for the Kingdom of Song, wasn't it? The day the wedding party from the Kingdom of Song arrived, my cat died in my arms. It had been with me for years. It clung to that frail body until the wedding envoys came, and only then closed its eyes in peace. "I'm going to find him," I whispered to the lifeless cat. "You have to bless me." Just then, Ivy came in. She was my only maid. She glanced at the cat. Grief flashed through her eyes, and then she leaned close and whispered, "He didn't come." Of course he wouldn't. I'd expected it. The Kingdom of Lin was the one suing for peace. I was the one being sent as a bride. He was the heir to a great kingdom. Why would he come in person to greet the wedding party? 5 days later, I set out with Ivy and a vast dowry, following the people from the Kingdom of Song. Before I left, the emperor looked at me. For the first time, his eyes held the expression I'd once longed for. He said, "If you are wronged, write to me." I smiled. Coming from him, such polite words were ridiculous. What wrong could I possibly suffer? He didn't know that everyone who had wronged me was already dead. Only he was still alive. Because he was my father. The road from the Kingdom of Lin to the Kingdom of Song was long. As a princess, and as a woman about to be married, I stayed inside the carriage the entire way. No one ever saw my face. Now and then I heard travelers mention the Kingdom of Song, but most of what I learned came from Ivy. She laid out the meal and knelt properly below me. I watched the slight gap at her collar. I narrowed my eyes. With a twist of my chopsticks, I flipped her collar open. Before she could cry out, I reached inside and drew out an unfamiliar jade pendant. Was there any part of her I didn't know? And yet today there was a pendant I'd never seen. The moment Ivy saw it in my hand, she dropped her chopsticks and prostrated herself. "Princess." Her voice trembled. I leaned down and lifted her chin with the pendant. "Ivy, I treat you this well. Yet you fear me, but you don't fear the owner of this pendant." She shook her head, trying to explain, but I hated explanations. I pressed a finger to her lips. Her lips were like the rest of her, soft and delicate. "Ivy, I told you, men out there are good at lying. I raised you like this, not so some man could ruin you." My finger brushed her pink lips. Then I casually tossed the pendant out of the carriage. When I looked back at the dishes, I'd lost my appetite. "Princess, I was wrong." Ivy crawled forward on her knees and pressed her forehead against my feet. I didn't look at her. I turned to the tassels by the window and flicked one with my fingers. "You said you would never leave me." My voice was hoarse. Perhaps it sounded frightening. Otherwise, why would Ivy start crying so softly? "Princess, I won't do it again." I sighed, then finally looked at her. With one hand, I tipped up her chin. With the other, I wiped away her tears. "Ivy, if there's a next time." I didn't finish. She understood. She knew me as well as I knew her. "How is Chloe Lin?" I asked, taking a bite of the food Ivy had set out. "She was sent back. Gabriel said she'd already been ruined," Ivy replied, placing another dish into my bowl. She knew me best. She knew what would anger me and what would please me. Now she was no longer so cautious. She seemed lighter, almost cheerful. And that news did please me. Chloe Lin was my missing third sister. She had been the original choice for the marriage alliance. The thing I wanted most had fallen into her hands with ease. If she hadn't provoked me again and again, I might have found her a perfect way out, a way to keep her from being sent away and still let her marry the man she loved. But she insisted on provoking me. "I'll go act cute with father and have you made the side consort of that useless crown prince. He's just like you, motherless, unwanted, and useless. You'll match perfectly." Those were Chloe Lin's words, spoken in my palace that day. I stroked the cat in my arms and thought her last sentence made perfect sense. But she didn't need to go and act cute. I had my own way of getting everything I wanted. As for her, she would never get to act cute with father again. By the time I heard Chloe Lin had taken her own life, I had already reached the border of the Kingdom of Song. Gabriel brought me that news. Gabriel was a eunuch I'd found in the palace, half dead. I no longer remembered what had put me in a good mood that day. I'd saved him on a whim. I hadn't expected him to be so capable. After that, he became my shadow, obedient and silent. He did everything I wanted done. I gave him a chance. If he came with me to the Kingdom of Song this time, I would never have let him go free again, I said, turning a page in my book as if it were nothing. Ivy trimmed the lamp wick. "I already passed on your words. He chose to stay." I nodded and said nothing more. We traveled another 2 months before reaching the capital of the Kingdom of Song. The envoy in charge told me that tomorrow, the 8th day of the 8th month, was an exceptionally auspicious date, so I should rest outside the city for a day and enter tomorrow. That night, as Ivy helped me settle in, she smiled. "He must remember you, or he wouldn't be so attentive. You and he will surely live long and peacefully together." Her words swept away the gloom Chloe Lin had left behind. Even the corners of my mouth lifted before I noticed. I had waited far too long and used far too many shameful means. All for this day. At dawn, I put on my wedding dress and covered my head with the red veil. Supported by Ivy, I stepped into the waiting sedan chair. But when my sedan entered through the side gate of the Eastern Palace, I finally understood. The 8th day of the 8th month hadn't been chosen for me. Today is the wedding of the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess. Everyone's gone to the Crown Princess's side. I heard the hushed chatter outside the sedan. The apple in my hand cracked in two. Ivy had pressed it into my palm when I boarded, saying it would bring good luck. It wasn't lucky at all. I don't know how much longer the sedan carried me before it stopped. Up ahead, someone announced, "Palace of Everjoy has arrived." Someone steadied the sedan and lifted the curtain. I hid the crushed apple in my sleeve and stepped down with Ivy's help. Then I entered the hall. I'd thought there would be no ceremony for a side consort. Fine, no bowing to heaven and earth. But I hadn't expected Julian Song wouldn't be there either. He wasn't coming tonight. Ivy stood at my side and whispered, "Princess, let me serve you something to eat. You haven't eaten all day." I said nothing. Then, "Shall I help you rest?" My fingertips sank into the broken apple. The red veil still covered my head. I lowered my gaze to the mangled fruit, and only then did my heartbeat steady a little. "Ivy, is he doing this to make me understand a side consort's place?" Ivy dropped to her knees and clasped my hands around the apple. "Princess." It didn't matter. What I wanted would be mine. I sat on the bed the entire night. Julian Song never came to lift my veil. When the supervising matron entered in the morning, she looked startled. She paused, then said, "Greetings, lady. This servant has come to escort you to pay respects and offer tea to the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess." Ivy rose beside me. Before she could speak, I said, "Please ask the Crown Prince to come and lift my wedding veil." "This?" The matron didn't move. Even if I was only a side consort, I was still a princess of the Kingdom of Lin. She might be unwilling, but she wouldn't dare refuse outright. "Go on. If the Crown Prince blames anyone, I'll bear it," I said gently. The matron answered, "Yes," and withdrew. After about the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, I heard the loud announcement outside. "The Crown Prince has arrived." Ivy knelt again to greet the man who entered. "Greetings, Crown Prince." Julian Song's footsteps drew closer. He told Ivy, "Rise," and stopped in front of me. I thought he might say something, but the bridle rod slid in from below. In an instant, the hall came into view. I lifted my head slightly and saw Julian Song standing before me. After all these years, the proud brilliance of his youth had faded from his features. Yet he was still the face that came to me in dreams every night. "Are you satisfied now, Princess?" His voice was as indifferent as his expression. I grasped the bridle rod in his hand and met his gaze, letting out a soft laugh. "Very satisfied." As if he hadn't expected that, Julian Song gave the rod a small tug. I pitched forward. The red veil fluttered like a crimson butterfly, danced twice in the air, then fell into his hand. "As long as the princess is satisfied," Julian Song said, his eyes as still as a pond. Now that the veil was lifted, I had no reason to keep sitting. I just didn't know that sitting too long could make your legs go numb. I had meant to throw myself into Julian Song's arms. I just hadn't expected the first time I saw him, it would happen in front of everyone. His body stiffened for a moment. Then he asked, "Have you hugged enough?" In my 16 years, I'd never been so embarrassed, so I simply wrapped my arms around his waist, rested my chin on his shoulder and smiled at him. No. The Crown Princess was the General's daughter, Serena Ye. Ivy had told me last night. The moment I entered the main hall, I saw Serena seated above. She looked nothing like me. When Julian Song took his seat beside her, a maid brought in the tea. Because I was a princess from another dynasty, I was spared from kneeling. I took the tea from the maid and offered it to Julian Song. "Your Highness, please drink." He accepted it and took a small sip. I returned his cup to the tray, then lifted another and offered it to Serena. The tea was warm, perfect for spilling onto myself. "Sister, please drink." The instant Serena reached for it, I flicked my fingers and tipped the cup toward myself. But Serena was quick. She caught it in time and gave me an apologetic smile, as if it truly had been her carelessness, her near mistake. I rubbed my fingertips. They still held the lingering warmth of the cup. This Serena Ye was interesting. After the greetings and tea, Julian Song left to handle state affairs. I lifted my eyes to Serena and turned to go, but she caught my hand. "Princess, the Crown Prince will come to your palace tonight." She looked at me, her gaze steady. I drew back my intent to kill her and smiled. "Where he goes is his choice." Serena, utterly lacking in tact, gripped my hand again. I looked at her pale, soft fingers. I thought of those hands attending Julian Song last night, and a vicious anger surged in me. Truly, my monthly bleeding has started. Tonight he'll definitely go to your place." Serena nodded, utterly sincere. The anger eased a little. I still stared at her hands. "Last night? Yes. Nothing happened last night, really. I slept on the couch." Serena raised 3 fingers beside her ear. "I swear." For some reason, my urge to eliminate her faded slightly. She let out a small breath and released my hand. Fine. I would believe her once. But when the hour of Shu arrived, Julian Song still hadn't come to my palace. I held the cup on the low table, watching the water tremble under my grip. She lied to me, I said flatly, my fingers whitening around the cup. Ivy brought me a book. He didn't go there either. Maybe something delayed him. I set the cup down and took the book. It was a volume with worn corners. I'd read it for years. When Julian Song arrived, it was still in my hands. Princess, you like this book too? His voice came from above me. I closed it slowly and looked up. Yes, I like it very much. He was the one who had told me to read it, but he seemed to have forgotten the book, and forgotten me. Ivy lit the 2 brightest candles, then withdrew. I ignored everything the matrons had taught me. I leaned back on the couch, hooked one finger into Julian Song's belt, and smiled at him. I like you too, Crown Prince. Julian Song's indifferent brows drew together slightly, then eased. He caught my hand again. Oh, and how do you like me? My fingers deftly undid his belt. Guess. He watched my hand climb higher. His brows lifted. In his clear eyes was a trace of wariness. I don't like guessing. I used none of what the matrons had taught me about the bed. It was all the same everywhere. Julian Song was never the same. If I wanted him to stay in my bed, I had to make him want more. The room grew hazy with heat. Julian Song hovered over me, desire staining his face. He no longer looked so calm and distant. Who taught you this? His voice was hoarse beyond recognition. I slid my arms around his neck, loose and soft. My tongue brushed his earlobe. I taught myself. Do you like it? The corners of his eyes reddened further. It seemed he liked it very much. Why is there a scar here? Julian Song asked, staring at the mark in my palm. I got it that day, when my mother's life was hanging by a thread and I fell on my way to seek the emperor. Back then, when Julian Song saw it, he asked me the same thing. I told him, heaven gave it to me. A reminder, so I'd never forget that humiliation. But now, for some reason, I didn't want to say that. I blinked, then lightly pressed the scar to Julian Song's lips. So you'll treasure me, Your Highness. Julian Song narrowed his clear eyes. Leaning in close to my ear, he murmured, Seems I misjudged you, Princess. You know how to seduce. His voice dripped with tenderness, every word softened to a caress. And yet there wasn't a trace of feeling in his eyes. I didn't like it. As if everything just now had been nothing more than an act. Maybe it had been an act from the very beginning. I rolled over and straddled him. My fingers brushed the hollow of his throat. You didn't misjudge me. I don't know how to seduce. Only when desire returned to tint his clear eyes did I feel like a mischievous child who'd gotten away with something, already wanting to retreat. But Julian Song didn't give me the chance. Thanks to him, I slept soundly for the first time. When I woke, Julian Song was already gone. Ivy looked at the dark and light marks on my skin, her eyes turning red. I brushed her lashes with my fingertips and smiled. Ivy, you don't understand. Those are marks of love. They don't hurt. But she clearly didn't believe me, because she'd also seen the blood on the bed. No explanation would convince her. Fine then. I didn't go to pay my respects to Serena Ye because she came herself. I was just about to go and pay my respects, I said lazily, lounging on the couch with my head propped on one hand against the low table. My sleeve slid from my arm to my elbow, exposing a few red marks. Serena Ye must have seen them. Her ears flushed pink at once. No. You're a princess. You can dispense with formalities, she said, smiling as she sat on the other side. I lifted my eyes, signaling Ivy to serve tea. Serena Ye looked innocent and sweet. The kind of girl you could tell had been raised in honey for over a decade. If she wanted anything, she only had to pout or act cute, and someone would place it in her hands. Not like me. Anything I wanted, I had to take myself. By any means. Serena Ye thanked Ivy for the tea, so politely Ivy almost dropped the tray. The crown princess is praising you. What are you afraid of? I reached out, tugged Ivy back, and made her stand beside me again. Ivy came back to herself and gave Serena Ye a small salute. At least she didn't embarrass me. Serena Ye smiled faintly and said, Princess, don't worry. I'll help you win the crown prince. Win? This Serena Ye was interesting. I sat up straight, took my tea from the low table, used the lid to sweep aside the leaves, and sipped. When I looked up again, I met Serena Yi's eager gaze and let out a light laugh. What do you mean, sister? Only then did she lean closer. I don't like the crown prince. I didn't choose to marry into this. The same line Chloe Lin had used. My gaze cooled. I snorted. The crown prince is unmatched and noble. Who are you to pick and choose? No. Serena Ye waved her hands quickly. I've long known you've been devoted to the crown prince since childhood. That's why I don't like him. The instant the words reached my ears, my hand closed around her throat. How do you know that? My voice went icy, my grip tightening. Serena Yi's maid screamed and turned to run. Ivy chased her down, seized her, and shut the door in one smooth motion. Serena's face blanched under my grip. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. I loosened my hand, then pinched her throat lightly with my fingertips and whispered into her ear, "Talk. Who are you? If you won't, I have plenty of ways to make you vanish without a sound." I meant it. The moment I let go, Serena Ye doubled over, coughing violently, until color finally returned to her pale face. Both hands clutched my arm. Tears from the coughing clung to the corners of her eyes. I'm Serena Ye. I guessed. I heard the crown prince once went to the Kingdom of Lin, and you didn't show the slightest dislike for the marriage alliance. You even insisted on waiting for the crown prince to lift your bridal veil. My nails pricked lightly into her delicate neck. The chill in my eyes didn't ease. Clever. Someone that clever couldn't be kept. Before I could tighten my hand again, she grabbed my wrist and forced it down. No, I'm stupid. People have called me stupid since I was little. If you don't believe me, go ask. Her answer caught me off guard. I froze. Then she said, I just think you're so beautiful. So beautiful that I really like you. I wanted to help. That I hadn't expected. No one had ever praised me for being beautiful. Not because I wasn't, but because my mother had been branded a bewitching consort who ruined the nation. And since I looked just like her, the same stain was stamped onto my face as well. Flatterer. I let go. I don't need your help. I didn't kill Serena Ye. Ivy could hardly believe it. Do you think the first thing I came here to do was kill her? I leaned back on the couch and turned a page in the book in my hands. Ivy said nothing. I smiled. She's a little special, and I get bored here. I needed someone to play with, someone to frighten. She didn't look like the type to tattle. Julian Song stayed in my palace for several nights in a row. That proved two things. First, Serena Ye really wouldn't tattle. Second, I really was good in bed. But that didn't mean Julian Song liked me. He just liked sleeping with me, because whenever he looked at me, his gaze was always indifferent, just like now. Princess, you've raised yourself a fine servant. Julian Song strode in from outside, as if he'd brought the cold wind with him. The hall chilled at once. I sat up from the couch. Before I could speak, I saw the figure behind him, Gabriel. Gabriel's skills were exceptional. In the palace of the Kingdom of Lin, he came and went like a shadow, never once caught. Yet now he was bound, dragged in behind Julian Song. I smoothed my expression, keeping my face calm. What does this mean, Your Highness? Julian Song shifted slightly, exposing Gabriel fully. What do you think it means? He stepped forward and pinched my chin. This servant is skilled. He's likely been tailing me for some time. Princess, do you know whether this is the Kingdom of Lin's will or yours? Of course it was mine. Everything Julian Song did had to be reported to me. That was the order I gave Gabriel. He'd done it well. In just a few days, I'd already learned Julian Song's situation thoroughly. I just hadn't expected Gabriel to be caught. I glanced at Gabriel, then met Julian Song's eyes. How do you plan to deal with him? A faint smile rested on his lips. His eyes were cold. How about handing him over to the Emperor? I knew he wasn't joking. If he turned Gabriel in now as a spy from the Kingdom of Lin, it would indeed bolster his current position. But I didn't want that. Gabriel can do anything, I said gently, each word steady. I'm sure he can do many things for you. Julian Song's position was awkward. He was the crown prince, yet he had no maternal clan to support him. He once had a powerful maternal clan. His uncle was the guardian general, but for reasons unknown, the emperor wiped out the entire family. The emperor intended to depose him and make Consort Rong's son, the second prince, the heir instead. But Julian Song was capable and restrained. They couldn't find a fault to use against him, and the plan stalled. So Consort Rong and the second prince planted informants throughout the Eastern Palace, all to dig up his mistakes. In just these few days, Gabriel had uncovered several. Even so, Julian Song remained stubborn. He released my chin and looked down at me. "Oh, I'm the crown prince. What can he do for me? For example?" I slid my hands up his neck and breathed softly against his earlobe. "Help you kill someone." I let go, pulled open the drawer beneath the low table, and took out a jade pendant. Julian Song's gaze darkened. Ivy also jolted in surprise. It was the jade pendant I'd thrown out of the carriage that day. But unlike that one, this pendant had blood seeped into the jade, a chilling stain. "Where did you get this?" Julian Song reached for it. I tossed it upward. It arced neatly through the air and landed in my other hand. "Of course I stole it from someone," I said, then cut a glance at Ivy. Her expression tightened slightly. I leaned closer and added, "From a dead man's hand." "Your personal attendant," I went on, tapping the pendant lightly against the low table as I laughed softly, "deliberately got close to my maid on the journey to Yingqin, hovered by my carriage day after day, and listened from the side. Tell me, why would he do that? At first I thought it was your order." I blinked at Julian Song, but I found he was hiding a forged imperial seal and a dragon robe. A crown prince's attendant secretly hiding a forged imperial seal and a dragon robe. That wasn't just losing the position of heir. Julian Song wasn't surprised in the slightest, so it had all been within his expectations. Only mine hadn't. "So you had Gabriel kill him?" He lowered his voice, likely wary of eavesdroppers. I tilted my head, propping my cheek, and gave a coquettish laugh. "And you didn't even notice, did you? I'd said I could make people disappear without a sound. That was what I did best." A ripple stirred in Julian Song's calm eyes. He let out a soft laugh. "Princess, you're more interesting than I thought." I wasn't interesting. I was simply better at killing than other girls. Julian Song accepted Gabriel, but he didn't trust him. So, right in front of me, he gave Gabriel a pill. "This is 7-day powder. Once you take it, you'll need to come to me every 7 days for the antidote." He didn't say the rest, but anyone with sense understood. Miss a dose, and you die. Of course, refusing it now also meant death. Gabriel clearly didn't want to. He looked up at me, as if ready to die to atone. That made me laugh, furious. "If the crown prince gives it to you, you take it. The crown prince keeps his word. Do you really think he'd refuse you the antidote?" That last line was meant for Julian Song to hear. He raised his brows and said nothing. Gabriel looked stunned that I'd say such a thing. After a long moment, he took the 7-day powder from Julian Song and put it into his mouth. Only after I watched him swallow did Julian Song turn back to me. "What did you give him before?" I glanced at Gabriel. My nails, tinted with floral dye, pressed to my lips as I blinked at Julian Song. "Guess?" "I don't like guessing." His mouth curved, still calm as ever. "I'll find out sooner or later." He wouldn't. Because what I'd given Gabriel was sugar. Gabriel himself didn't even know. When I saved him, I was still young. I had only Ivy with me. Where would I get some peerless poison to bind him? All I had was a mouth good at lying. That night, Julian Song didn't stay in my palace. He didn't even eat dinner here. I heard he went to Serena Ye's. Of course he did. He'd married Serena Ye for military power. How could he casually neglect her? Given his situation, if Serena Ye hadn't been determined to marry him, how could he have wed the general's only daughter? I hadn't thought of that before. I'd even believed Serena Ye's casual lies. Do I really look that easy to fool, Ivy? I lay on the bed as Ivy tucked the blanket around me. She knew what I meant and said softly, "Princess, it's just that she's too good at lying." I stared at the tassels hanging from the bed curtains and thought I'd gone soft since coming here. If I'd killed Serena Ye on the first day, how could she have played me like a monkey? Outside the window, rain began to fall, fine and relentless. I'd always hated rainy days, yet now the timing felt perfect. I didn't know how long it was before the rain grew heavier. Just as I drifted between waking and sleep, someone knocked at the hall door. Ivy, standing guard by the bed, smiled. It must be the crown prince. I thought it was Julian Song too, but a maid reported that Serena Ye had come. When I wanted to kill her, she delivered herself to my door. When Serena Ye walked in, she carried the dampness of someone who'd rushed through the rain. Her hair had come loose, the ends slightly wet, as if she'd just bathed. Catching me looking, she blinked and asked, "Princess, can I sleep with you tonight?" I'd imagined countless reasons she might come at this hour. The one I'd never imagined was that she came to sleep with me. Her eyes sparkled, as if she truly looked forward to sharing a bed. After she asked, I decided I'd kill her tomorrow instead. I leaned against the bed and covered my mouth, yawning lightly. "Sister, you must be joking. The crown prince is still in your palace. Precisely because he's in my palace, I need to sleep with you." She blinked and rushed over. "Do you like sleeping on the inside or the outside?" Serena Yi's shamelessness far exceeded anything I'd understood about her. I opened my mouth. Before I could refuse, she'd already taken off her shoes and climbed onto the bed. Ivy stared, wide-eyed, at Serena Yi wriggling farther in, wearing the expression of someone thinking, "She's finished. If you won't say, then I'll sleep inside. I'm afraid of the cold." Serena Yi lay down on the inside and blinked at me with innocent eyes while I still sat there stunned. Other than my mother, I'd never shared a bed with any woman. "Get down." I frowned slightly. Ivy and the maid who came with Serena Yi both dropped to their knees in fright. Serena Yi startled too. When I thought she'd finally obey, she gritted her teeth and wrapped her arms around me. "No, if I go back and sleep with the crown prince, I'll die anyway. If I sleep with you, I'll die anyway. I'd rather die clean in your bed." "Oh?" I lifted a brow. Just as I was about to ask how she wanted to die, thunder cracked. Sound seemed to vanish in an instant. My face went white. Ivy scrambled up to close the window, and Serena Yi suddenly flung back the blanket and pulled me under it. Under the covers, it was warm and dark. I couldn't see anything. I could only feel Serena Yi's hot breath against my face. Then she gently covered my ears with her hand, and my mind went blank. A long, long time ago, when my mother was still alive, whenever thunder rolled, she would pull me into the bedclothes and gently cover my ears. Serena Yi's voice overlapped with my mother's. "Don't be afraid. It'll pass soon." I don't remember how I fell asleep. When I woke, no one was beside me. Ivy brought in water, and only then did I sit up. Did the crown princess come last night? It had to have been a dream. A ridiculous dream. Ivy's expression was complicated. She set the copper basin on its stand, wringing the cloth as if it took all her strength. "The crown princess left before dawn. She told me not to wake you. She said to prepare face-washing water when it was about time for you to wake." So she really had come. I took the cloth Ivy handed me. Before I even raised it to my face, I heard her mutter, "I've served you for so long. Do I really understand you less than she does?" Only then did I realize the habit of washing my face the moment I woke. By rights, only Ivy and my mother should have known. Only my mother knew I was afraid of thunder. "Serena, who are you?" After that, I stared into space all morning. In the end, my thoughts grew more and more absurd, and I forced myself to stop. "Ivy, you don't seem to like the crown princess much," I asked casually. Ivy picked at her sleeve. After a while, she said in a small voice, "Princess, you treat her differently. If it were anyone else, they'd have died 1,000 times over. She serves the same husband as you do. Who knows what she's thinking?" What could she be thinking? If she had any real scheme, I could end her with one finger. Since I couldn't make sense of any of it, I took Ivy to Serena Yi's Azure Phoenix Palace. "Our lady didn't sleep well last night and is still making it up," the maids of Azure Phoenix Palace said, blocking me. I didn't know how she slept, but I'd slept just fine. "Where's the crown prince?" I asked, even as I prepared to leave. The maid lowered her head. "The crown prince left at the hour of yin. That was when he went to court." I'd only taken 2 steps with Ivy when 2 little maids came toward us. "Last night, the crown prince spent the whole night in the small study." I don't know what the crown princess was thinking. "Shh! I heard the crown princess snuck off to the palace of Everjoy last night." Before she could finish, the 2 maids saw me, clamped their mouths shut, and bowed. So Serena Yi going to my place had already spread throughout the Eastern Palace. "Princess, I heard the Eastern Palace garden has its own charm. How about we go sit there?" Ivy interrupted my thoughts. Sitting there would be fine. To reach the Eastern Palace garden, we had to pass through an artificial rockery. The layout was unusual, but I never expected that beyond the rockery would be a single log bridge. At Ivy's cry behind me, I fell into Julian Song's arms. He smelled good. That cool fragrance that was uniquely his. So you didn't come last night, and now you're throwing yourself into my arms? Julian Song caught me and landed unhurriedly on the ground. My face warmed. I wrapped my arms around his waist and smiled. I heard you slept in the small study last night. Was my bed not more comfortable? He released me and walked toward a pavilion to the side, smiling. I rarely saw him smile. When he did, it was clean and bright, more dazzling than the flowers filling the garden. What are you smiling at? I ignored Ivy still inching across the single-log bridge and followed him. Julian Song sat by a stone table. Across from him sat an empty cup. Someone had been here just moments ago. I'm smiling at your temper, he said. Who did you learn it from? I've heard the Kingdom of Lin honors old rules, and the women are all very reserved and obedient. With a flick of his hand, he tossed the empty cup into the lotus pond behind him. I sat beside him, propping my head on one hand as I studied him and blinked slowly. My temper is natural. Don't you like it? Julian Song caught my wrist and drew me lightly into his arms. I wouldn't say I dislike it. Just as I was about to take the next step and tempt him, he leaned to my ear and said, Your father sent you a letter. The moment he said it, my entire body went rigid. All desire vanished. If I had to say who I learned my temper from, it was my mother. But she died under the name of the bewitching consort who ruined the nation. And it all happened in my father's harem while he watched without lifting a finger. He gave her boundless favor, then let her fall into the mud. Julian Song drew me back. His finger gently wound a strand of hair near my temple. Don't you want to know what it says? What could it say? Nothing but polite words, meant to let the Kingdom of Song know I truly was their most favored princess. I didn't ask Julian Song what my father wrote. He said if I need anything, he'll lend me troops. Julian Song's breath brushed behind my ear, and I shrank my neck slightly. What do you think your father means? His voice was light, his intent unreadable. I didn't know what he meant. But to anyone else's ears, it would sound like plotting a coup. I lifted my hand, hooked my arm around Julian Song's neck, and looked at him. In the Kingdom of Lin, we honor old rules. Women don't meddle in politics. In Julian Song's eyes that had held killing intent, a smile suddenly bloomed, though it didn't reach the depths. He raised a hand and adjusted the hair ornament at my bun. Princess, you really are interesting. A gust of wind swept through, and the oppressive tension around us scattered. The people lying in ambush nearby withdrew without a sound. So from the moment he saw that letter, he'd wanted to kill me. Where did Gabriel go? I changed the subject. He hadn't been among those people just now. I knew Gabriel's temperament. If he was in the palace, he wouldn't cut off contact with me. Julian Song toyed with a strand of my hair. I sent him to kill someone, to see if what you said was true. Though his tone stayed calm, my heart tightened. My arms around his neck tensed without my meaning to. Who did you tell him to kill? What? He's just a servant. You care that much? Julian Song said. Gabriel wasn't a servant. I didn't want him to die. I was just asking, I said, loosening my hold and rising from his lap. The subject I'd changed to wasn't any more pleasant than the last. The strand of hair slipped from Julian Song's fingers. He closed his hand as if to catch it, then rubbed his fingertips together. Not some hard-to-kill royal relative, just someone I can't deal with myself. Gabriel will be back tomorrow. I hadn't expected him to explain, and I hadn't expected that the day after he took Gabriel, he'd send him out on a task. Even though climbing back into his lap might look deliberate, I did it anyway. Ignoring the slight lift of his brows, I blinked at him. You have your reasons for what you do. I just didn't expect you'd trust Gabriel so much. Julian Song caught another strand of my hair, a faint smile in his eyes. I told him that when he can't see, I have plenty of ways to make you suffer. He said it ambiguously, but I understood. He was using me to threaten Gabriel. That didn't matter, as long as he wasn't sending Gabriel to his death. For several days after that, I didn't see Julian Song. I didn't see Serena Ye either. Ivy said the palace was busy preparing for the emperor's birthday celebration. Julian Song and Serena Ye must have been occupied with that. Only I was so idle I could do nothing but flip through books and stare at the sun. When Serena Ye came, I was dozing in the sunlight. Hearing footsteps draw near, I lifted my head, glanced at her, and said lazily, "Sister has time today." At my words, Serena Yee's eyes lit up. She pulled out something furry from behind her back. The furry thing looked up at me too and drawled, "Meow." Nothing like the one I had in the Kingdom of Lin. "Throw it out," I said flatly. Serena Ye hurriedly shielded the cat and sat beside me. "The Crown Prince found it for you. He said you'd be bored alone in your palace." I looked again and found it much more pleasing. I glanced at Ivy, and Ivy, quick to read the room, stepped forward and took the cat from Serena Ye's arms. Pretending not to see Serena Ye press her pink lips together, I said softly, "When the Crown Prince comes, I'll thank him myself." "All right," Serena Ye smiled. She really wasn't likable, especially those dimples that appeared when she smiled. So sweet it turned cloying. I hated sweets most of all, but right now, I didn't really want to kill her. She wouldn't compete with me for Julian's song. And when thunder came, she could sometimes help cover my ears. Fine then. She couldn't choose her dimples either. What broke my train of thought was Serena Ye saying, "Tomorrow is the Emperor's birthday celebration. Go with the Crown Prince." Though I was Julian Song's secondary consort, I was also a princess of a foreign kingdom. Of course, I had the right to accompany Julian Song to offer birthday congratulations. "I won't go," she added. I looked at her, not understanding. The Crown Prince's principal consort not accompanying him was improper by any standard. If it were pursued, it would be a serious offense. And it wouldn't just affect her. It would implicate Julian Song. "Why aren't you going?" My voice turned cold. Serena Ye stuck out her tongue. "I won't feel well tomorrow." It was the first time I'd learned you could pick the day you fell ill. But it turned out that the next day, Serena Ye truly wasn't well. The imperial physician came once and said she was burning with fever, babbling deliriously. I frowned. "She was fine yesterday. Today she's feverish and delirious?" Ivy nodded. I didn't believe it. When I reached Azure Phoenix Palace, the little maidservant attending Serena Ye had just carried a basin of water inside. This time, no one stopped me. It was my first time entering Serena Ye's inner chamber. The furnishings weren't what I'd imagined. They were simple, not the kind of simple that came from pinching pennies, just an odd plainness, though I couldn't have said why. Serena Ye lay in bed, her small face flushed. It looked like a fever. I knew it. She was delicate, spoiled and pampered. That was why the smallest trouble could make her sick. I let out a snort and glanced at her. Sister really does know everything in advance. Serena Ye opened her eyes and tried to sit up. I lifted a hand and pressed her back down. "I was just thinking I'd come find you later," she said with a soft smile. "Find me for what?" She gave her maidservant a look. The girl slowly withdrew. I flicked a lazy glance at Ivy. Ivy nodded and stepped out as well. With no one left in the room, Serena Ye tried to get up again. I frowned, pushed her back once more and said flatly, "Lie down and talk." She chuckled and finally stayed still. "When you go to the banquet with the Crown Prince this afternoon, you must stay by his side the whole time." Serena Ye stared at me, her gaze steady. She didn't look like she was rambling at all. She grabbed my hand. With the fever, her palm was frighteningly hot. "Tonight, assassins will enter the palace. Find a way to make the Crown Prince more careful. If he won't listen, don't let him leave the banquet." Her words grew more and more absurd. Marquise Pingchang's only daughter will also be there. Other young ladies will force her to perform before the Emperor. Don't mock her, and don't let her get close to the Crown Prince. Every word sounded ridiculous, yet her eyes were serious, unwavering. So she really was delirious from the fever. I picked up a neatly folded sweat cloth and laid it across her forehead. "Rest well." I stood, feeling that if I stayed, I'd be stuck listening to her nonsense for a long time. When Julian Song and I left, Serena Ye's fever still hadn't broken. I sighed lightly and told Ivy behind me, "Go tell them. Have the imperial physician come again." Ivy froze, then said yes. Julian Song, walking ahead of me, turned his head slightly. "The princess and the crown princess truly get along." "It's all for the Crown Prince." I smiled faintly. My eyes must have looked full of charm. "On the wedding day, the Crown Princess told me to show you more favor." I thought she was joking. He smiled and kept walking. Lately, he smiled more and more. I stood there, dazed for a moment. I hadn't known that. The Kingdom of Song's longevity festival was grander than the Kingdom of Lin's. The entire palace was ablaze with lights and decorations. The banquet was packed. Julian Song and I stepped down from the palanquin at the entrance. He suddenly held out a hand to me. Though I often teased him in private, I didn't dare guess his intentions now. When I still didn't move, he simply took the hand hanging at my side. They're all unimportant people. If you don't want to deal with them, then don't. His palm had a thin layer of calluses. Holding my hand made my skin tingle, and I couldn't bring myself to pull away. He was afraid I'd be stared at, treated badly, a princess from a defeated kingdom. I followed behind him, step by step. Looking at his back, I seemed to see the pure white boy from years ago, the one who had once held my hand. I sat beside Julian Song and watched as the tribute offerings, announced in a high voice by a white-haired eunuch, were presented to the emperor one by one. After the gifts came the music and dance, arranged by the music bureau, and then the performances offered by the officials. The chancellor's daughter finished a piece on the zither. The emperor smiled and praised her. By rights, she should have stepped down. Instead, she remained below, poised and composed. I've heard that Sister Vivian Gu of Marquis Pingchang's household has a dance that once stunned the capital city. Elsie has longed to see it for a long time. I'd like to play a piece to accompany Sister Vivian Gu's dance. Today is the Emperor's great day of celebration. May I have that honor? There wasn't a hint of affectation, and yet I caught the smugness at the corner of her eyes. Oh, the little girl from Marquis Pingchang's family has such skill? The Emperor was clearly intrigued. In the end, amid the chorus of noble young ladies, Vivian Gu was forced to step into the center. It overlapped perfectly with Serena Ye's nonsense. I looked at Vivian Gu below and felt as though everything before me couldn't possibly be real. What is it? You like this dance that much? Julian Song leaned closer, his voice low. I shook my head. I was distracted. I hadn't even seen what she was dancing. Do you think it looks good? I lowered my voice too. Julian Song took a sip of wine. A faint blush crept over his ears. Didn't look. At that moment, the emperor on the raised seat looked over as well. He seemed to smile without smiling as he asked Julian Song, "Xing'er, what do you think of this dance?" Julian Song stood and bowed, calm and unhurried. "Father, Miss Gu's dance is gentle and graceful. Paired with Miss Zhang's heavenly zither music, I believe it is excellent." Every word was measured. No one could find fault with it. An arrow shot in from nowhere. I yanked Julian Song instinctively. The arrow slammed straight into the pillar behind him. He avoided it, yet it still left him slick with cold sweat. Even his face went pale. In an instant, everything descended into chaos. Amid the clamor, the emperor hurried over, worry plain on his face. "Xing'er, were you hurt?" Julian Song's fingers trembled slightly, as if he'd been badly shaken. I'm fine." His eyes went blank for a moment, as though he'd only just come back to himself. "Father, were you startled? I was useless." The emperor lifted a hand and patted his shoulder with a sigh. "How is that your fault?" Then he turned to the commander of the Imperial Guards, already kneeling below. "I feed you all, so you can let assassins come and go as they please?" The commander lowered his head and begged for punishment. I watched coldly. It all felt like a carefully staged play. Only then did the emperor seem to notice me. "We have Princess Aurora to thank for this." Princess Aurora was the title my father had granted me before I married. It was the first time I'd heard anyone say it out loud. Before I could answer, the emperor spoke again. "Xing'er seems greatly frightened. Princess Aurora, go with Xing'er to rest in the side hall for a while." I remembered what Serena Ye had told me earlier. Julian Song must not leave the banquet. Everything before this had come true, one by one. I couldn't gamble his life on that one sentence. I supported Julian Song and spoke before he could. "Thank you for your concern, father. But the crown prince is unsettled. He probably shouldn't get up and move around." My voice carried shock and fear. That was likely what everyone wanted to see, from the crown prince and his household. I held Julian Song's hand just as he had held mine when we arrived. "Father, don't worry. I'm the crown prince. How can I avoid the situation at a time like this?" Julian Song clasped my hand back within his wide sleeve. He understood too. This wasn't the time to go to the side hall. Tonight's assassin was targeting him. If the first arrow missed, there would be another. Staying at the banquet was the best choice. Serena Ye had calculated even this. The emperor left the banquet under imperial guard escort. Everyone else was forbidden to leave the palace until the assassin was found. While everyone sank into panic, Julian Song slowly gathered the fear back into his face. Holding my hand, he retreated toward the rear. "I'll take you somewhere good," he said, leading me away. I followed him for the time it took to finish a cup of tea before he stopped. What I saw was almost unbelievable. It was late autumn, yet the lotus flowers in the pond were in full, lush bloom. I blinked and couldn't help taking 2 more steps forward. Julian Song tugged my hand and pulled me back, chuckling softly. "Watch your footing." I looked down. 1 more step and I would have fallen in. "Thank you, Crown Prince." He looked at me. In his eyes, ice seemed to melt. "You saved my life just now. Consider this even." I froze, then realized he meant he'd just saved my life too. "That's not the same." I stepped closer. "I can swim. Falling in wouldn't have mattered." He released my hand and went into a nearby pavilion, sitting down. "You're very calculating. What do you want as repayment for saving my life?" Moonlight spilled over him, making him look even more extraordinary. He'd just survived an assassination attempt, yet sitting there he looked like a passerby watching a play. I hurried to sit beside him, resting a hand on the railing. "How about you repay me with yourself?" A smile spread across Julian Song's lips. This time, it carried a trace of real warmth. He glanced around and said, "Here?" Even though I'd long learned to keep a straight face, I still blushed at his words. The air turned so intimate it was hard to breathe, and I couldn't find a single sentence to throw back at him. He laughed harder, then casually drew a small pouch from his robe. "You carry fish feed with you?" I quickly changed the subject. Julian Song pinched out some feed and scattered it into the pond. At once, little fish swarmed over. Red ones and white ones fought to snatch the feed floating on the surface. "Do they look like them?" Julian Song turned to me, mischief in his eyes. The mood shifted instantly. I smiled too, pinched some feed from his hand, and tossed it in. "Too bad the Crown Prince's net isn't finished yet." He looked at me. Tiny starlight seemed to flicker in his eyes. "I used to think you were just some princess your father sent to fool me," he said. I could hear it. He was surprised by me now, even a little impressed. I rubbed my fingers together, letting the crumbs scatter into the air, and met his gaze. "Didn't you specify you wanted the most favored princess of my kingdom?" Confusion flickered in Julian Song's eyes. "I never said that." "What? Then whose mouth had that come from?" He smiled. "Then I got the better deal." He didn't know it was I who got the better deal. He was the man I'd gained only after exhausting every scheme. That year I was only 8. My mother had been dead for a year. No consort in any palace was willing to take me in. Even passing maids and eunuchs could look at me with cold contempt. I grew used to hiding in a hole inside a rockery when no one noticed me. I would wait until the path was empty, then slip back to Jade Spring Palace. No one ever came to pull me out. Until one day, Julian Song passed by. He took my hand and led me out of the hole. "You can dodge, but you can't hide," he said. Dressed in white, he looked like an immortal official sent to save all living beings. Back then, he was still full of youthful pride, triumph in his brows, pure white and arrogant. Not like him now, with every thought buried deep, like a lion crouched in a cave. The him of today and the me of today. We matched perfectly, as if heaven had made us for each other. When footsteps approached, Julian Song was asking how I'd fed Serena Ye some kind of mind-bewitching potion. Clearly, I hadn't fed her anything of the sort. Ivy, on the other hand, believed Serena Ye had fed one to me. Following Julian Song's wary gaze, I turned and soon saw a face clean and beautiful beyond the ordinary. "This daughter greets the Crown Prince. Greetings to the consort." Vivian Gu looked slightly surprised to see us, but she quickly performed a thorough salute. I instinctively looked at Julian Song. The light in his eyes from earlier was gone. He returned to that idle, unconcerned look, nodded at her, and scattered more fish feed into the pond. "The Crown Prince is resting here. You should find somewhere else," I said coolly. I'd assumed she'd come to approach Julian Song on purpose. Instead, she answered, "Yes," and turned to leave. After 2 steps, she looked back. "The assassin still hasn't been found. Be careful." Then she walked back the way she came. The assassin was found at midnight. The commander of the Imperial Guards found Julian Song and me in the pavilion. He bowed and said, "The assassin has committed suicide." From his practiced movements, it was clear this wasn't the first time he'd come to the pavilion for Julian Song. And it wasn't the first time an assassin who'd tried to kill Julian Song had committed suicide. What was more, as the Emperor's commander of the Imperial Guards, his first move after finding the assassin should have been to report to the Emperor. Instead, he came running to Julian Song. Julian Song only nodded slightly and said gently, "Then arrange for everyone at the banquet to disperse." I realized Julian Song was far more formidable than I'd ever known. After the aftermath was handled, we returned to the Eastern Palace. The sky was already paling. As soon as I stepped down from the palanquin, I saw the little girl attending Serena. Yi let out a breath of relief and ran inside. Her short legs moved fast. I'd wanted to ask whether Serena Yi's fever had gone down, but I couldn't even catch her. Back at the Eastern Palace, Julian Song didn't return to the sleeping quarters. He went straight to Chonghua Hall to handle state affairs. He must have been dealing with what had happened today. I hadn't slept all night. As soon as I returned to Palace of Everjoy, I collapsed into bed. When I woke, Serena Ye had come. Her illness had struck suddenly, and it vanished just as suddenly. Now there was no trace of yesterday's weakness. I watched her direct servants to carry in a bronze pot and fresh ingredients. "What is this for?" Serena Ye took my hand as usual and led me to sit by the table. "It's hot pot. You must have been scared last night. I know you like spicy food, so hot pot is perfect for settling your nerves." I didn't know what hot pot was, but I grabbed her hand instead. My grip was tight. She flinched. "How do you know I like spicy food?" No one knew that except my mother. Even Ivy didn't know. I never revealed my eating habits. I thought they could be used against me. A flicker of annoyance crossed Serena Yi's face. The hand I held struggled slightly. She explained. "I guessed, because you don't like sweets." I loosened my grip without thinking. She pulled free at once. I leaned in. "And how do you know I don't like sweets?" This time she didn't explain. She picked up chopsticks, dropped some vegetables into the bronze pot and said, "Cook, cook. You've never had hot pot before. I promise once you try it, you'll want it again." It was obvious. She was changing the subject, even if I didn't want to admit it. One thing after another linked together, forced a thought into my mind. I looked at Serena Ye and forced out each word. "What relationship do you have with my mother?" "Huh?" Serena Ye turned to look at me. I glanced around the hall. The servants who'd brought in the dishes were gone. Only Ivy and Serena Ye's personal little maid remained. I closed my eyes and asked the question I'd turned over in my heart countless times, absurd beyond belief. "Are you my mother?" Serena Ye's chopsticks trembled and fell to the floor. "No, princess." She held my hand and spoke with great seriousness. "We don't need to raise your seniority that high." Serena Ye said she had nothing to do with my mother. But I had Ivy look into it. The rumors about Serena Ye were all the same. Foolish and talentless, and hopelessly devoted to Julian Song. Someone who could calculate everything down to the last detail couldn't possibly be foolish and talentless. And Serena Ye truly kept avoiding Julian Song. No matter how I turned it over, none of it made sense. What made even less sense was that the hot pot she brought was unbelievably good. All you had to do was swish ordinary ingredients through the broth and they became delicious. "Ivy, is hot pot a specialty of the Kingdom of Song?" I sucked in my stomach, yet my slightly rounded belly didn't flatten much. I had never been this improper. Days passed, one by one, easy and beautiful. Julian Song seemed to like me a little. In bed, he no longer moved with the same mercilessness as on the first day. I didn't know whether he liked me for my skill in bed or for my skill outside it. But as long as he liked me even a little, it was enough. Julian Song lay beside me, winding a strand of my hair around his fingers. "Your father sends you a letter every month," he said with a smile. His smile no longer felt cold and distant the way it used to. I found a comfortable place in his arms and murmured, Then he sighed softly. I suddenly asked, "Crown Prince, do you truly like me? Even just a little?" It sounded a bit humble. Not like me at all. Julian Song seemed caught off guard. After a long moment, he murmured, With that, it felt like everything had been worth it. From time to time, Serena Ye would bring me foods I'd never seen before. She never explained where all her oddities came from, and I never again felt the urge to kill her. This day, she brought another plate of pastries. I looked at my belly, now a full size bigger. I told Ivy to throw both her and her pastries out. "If you don't eat this plate today, you'll regret it," Serena Ye shouted from inside. She didn't look like a noble young lady at all. I sighed, petted the cat in my arms, now also a bit rounder, and let her bring the pastries in. Seeing that she, too, had gained some weight, I suddenly felt that eating 2 more bites wouldn't hurt. Serena Ye stuffed a pastry into her mouth. "Winter hunting season is coming. This time I'm going with you." In the past 2 months, no matter what banquet it was, she always found a reasonable excuse to avoid attending. Now, the talk outside about the crown princess not being favored had spread everywhere. Some people's words were unbearably vile. I even had Gabriel deal with a few of them. Yet this time she insisted on going with us. It surprised me. But I didn't ask. Julian Song was surprised too. So were the attendants, because no one had planned for Serena Ye to go with us this time. So the carriage was the same one as before. With 3 people, it would be cramped. Julian Song stood at the door and said to Theo beside him, "Go prepare another one." Theo accepted the order and jogged off. Julian Song looked at Serena Ye. Before he could speak, I casually took Serena Ye's hand and said, "The crown prince likely still has matters to handle. I'll share a carriage with sister." If I rode with Julian Song, the rumors outside would only grow uglier. Serena Ye was used to life in the Eastern Palace, and she'd been pampered since childhood. She had never heard filthy talk like that. In the end, I pulled Serena Ye into the carriage while Julian Song hesitated, as if he wanted to speak. The moment we got in, Serena Ye burst out laughing. I looked at her. She only laughed harder. "Princess, you didn't see the crown prince's face. He looked like he wanted to eat me alive." She winked at me. "Do you usually do other things with him in the same carriage?" My face heated at once. When Julian Song and I rode together, we did indeed get up to things. But I was used to being that way with him. I hadn't thought much of it. With Serena Ye saying it out loud, I suddenly felt a bit shameless. I turned my face away, too lazy to respond, and pulled a book from the side drawer. It was a book Julian Song liked. I sometimes read along. He said he liked me like that. No matter the topic, I could always trade a few words with him. Suddenly I thought of that clean, beautiful woman. Perhaps she too could talk with Julian Song about anything. What kind of person is Vivian Gu? I flipped a page, asking as if it meant nothing. Serena Ye lit up and leaned closer, lifting a hand to block my book. "Let me tell you, she's amazing. Anything you can do, she can do. Anything you can't do, she can do too. And she's not cold to everyone like you are. She smiles at everyone. Pretty face, real talent, good family, good temperament. Basically, everyone loves her. Everyone loves her." I frowned and looked at her. "You like her too?" Serena Ye hooked my arm. "I like you." "Then will Julian Song like her?" I asked without thinking. Serena Ye gave me a mysterious smile. He would have, originally. But now, this was my first time taking part in the Kingdom of Song's royal hunt. Back in the Kingdom of Lin, I attended hunts too. But I never felt involved. This time was different. I was Julian Song's favored consort. I was part of everything. Julian Song had no great achievements to his name, but as long as the emperor didn't strip him of the title of crown prince, he remained the heir. The officials who wanted to curry favor with him were no fewer than those who wanted to curry favor with the second prince. It was just that Julian Song handled matters without a leak and refused every advance. Anyone who couldn't get close to Julian Song sent their wives and daughters to get close to me instead. Of course, I never bothered with people I didn't want to bother with. Serena Ye and I sat at a table, watching the latest of who knew how many noblewomen get driven off by Ivy and Serena Ye's little maid. Serena Ye shook her head, cracking melon seeds, and looked me up and down. "Princess, haven't you been eating a bit too much lately?" I knew she meant I'd gotten fat. If she hadn't brought strange foods every day, I wouldn't have gained a full size in just 2 months. Last night, Julian Song had also stared at my belly in deep thought. In that moment, I truly wanted to vomit up everything I'd eaten and never again let Serena Ye talk me into eating. Not long after, the first round of prey was brought back. As expected, Theo behind Julian Song carried not a single kill. Julian Song was more skilled than Gabriel. The calluses on his hands also proved his swordsmanship wasn't bad. Yet in public he always looked mediocre, useless, idle. No one knew he could fight. No one knew many people in the palace were already under his control. I watched him walk toward me, step by step. Suddenly it was as if I saw him walking, step by step, toward the throne. The man I loved had to become the supreme ruler. But just as he reached my side and was about to sit down, an arrow shot from ahead. It was exactly as Serena Ye had said. Before I could speak, Julian Song twisted aside and avoided it. But the instant he turned, another arrow flew in from behind him. He couldn't dodge that one. I didn't think at all. I threw myself behind him. I heard the sound of a sharp weapon sinking into flesh. I heard Serena Ye scream. The hunting grounds erupted into chaos. It was always chaos after the arrow was loosed. They never got tired of this play. I fell into Julian Song's arms with a cold smile. The corners of his eyes reddened as he roared at Theo. "Go get the imperial physician." So his eyes reddened in daily life too, not only in bed. It was the first time I'd seen Serena Ye cry. It turned out her crying wasn't as likable as I'd imagined. Before I lost consciousness, I heard her snap at me. "I told you not to block it." It was the first time she had ever scolded me. She had told me. She'd said that even if danger came, I must not take the hit for Julian Song. Because Julian Song was the chosen one, protected by the heavens, and he would not die. But I was different. I had suffered since childhood. Any luck I had could not outweigh that arrow. She didn't know I never believed in gods or Buddhas. I had waited for Julian Song for 8 years. Even in dreams, I had wanted to keep him locked at my side. After all it took to reach today, how could I watch an arrow, possibly poisoned, pierce his body? I didn't know how far I walked through the endless white. Then I suddenly saw a light. "Luna Lin, he took the fate for you." A voice came from all directions. I couldn't tell whose voice it was, but grief surged up from my heart. In the end, it turned into warmth, spilling from the corners of my eyes. "She's awake! She's awake! The princess is awake!" I heard Ivy's voice beside me, thick with tears. I forced my eyes open and saw people crowding in. Julian Song sat by the bed. His former calm, effortless composure was nowhere to be seen. Everyone looked heartbroken, even though I'd already woken, but I felt as if something inside me had been hollowed out. I looked at Ivy's swollen eyes. She lowered her head and didn't dare meet mine. Something flashed through my mind. My hand drifted to my lower belly. Cloth was wrapped around it. I stared at Julian Song in disbelief. "Crown Prince." He covered my hand with his. His lips parted, but in the end he only said, "Horse, there will be another." I didn't believe it. Why now, of all times? I'd had no symptoms. I hadn't felt anything at all. My period has always been irregular. Maybe it was because I caught too many chills when I was little. So when it didn't come for over a month, I thought it was just the same as always. Ivy thought so too. For the first time in all these years, I was furious with myself. So furious that I lay in bed, drifting in and out for days until I finally woke, dazed. Julian Song sat by my bedside. When he saw my eyes open, the corner of his mouth lifted in a faint smile. "Hungry? Want some pastries?" He helped me sit up and gave me a sip of water. It tasted like bile. The bitterness slid from my mouth straight into my heart. I looked at Julian Song. His brows and eyes were so handsome, and I couldn't help wondering, if that little one had been born safely, would the child have looked like him too? The more I thought about it, the more wronged I felt. My shoulders began to shake, beyond my control. Julian Song wrapped an arm around me and patted my back gently. I couldn't hold it in anymore. Tears spilled out, running to the corner of my mouth. Bitter, too. I didn't do it on purpose. I didn't know. I raised a hand to cover my face. In an instant, even the spaces between my fingers were wet. It had been a very, very long time since I'd cried like this. The hand Julian Song kept on my back trembled, too. He lifted it and cupped the back of my head. A flustered, unsteady kiss landed on my forehead. I know. I didn't know how long I cried before Julian Song finally soothed me back to sleep. When I woke again, I learned he'd become even busier. He was so busy he only came to see me late at night, then spent the night on the couch making do. Gabriel said that to take that seat as soon as possible. Julian Song had gone several nights without sleep. Only after I woke did he allow himself a brief rest on the couch. I knew I'd thrown his original plan off. He wanted revenge for the child who never got to be born. But right now, he was hemmed in at every turn. There was no way to speed things up without moving people around and stirring up trouble, so I could only pretend I was getting better. Tonight, he slipped quietly to my bedside. He meant to look at me once and leave. But I reached out and hooked my fingers around his belt. My lord. I opened my eyes to look at him. Sleep with me. His hand covered mine. Don't be ridiculous. I held tight to his belt and refused to let go. In the end, Julian Song let out a sigh so soft it was almost inaudible. He lifted a hand and snuffed out the brightest candles. Still dressed, he lay down beside me. Before I could even move, he pulled me into his arms over the quilt. Be good. Sleep. When sunlight spilled through the window, I opened my eyes and saw Julian Song beside me. It seemed he hadn't slept like this in a long time. His shallow breaths brushed against my neck. I looked at the faint bluish shadows under his eyes and felt my heart ache even more. I couldn't become his burden. Everyone knew who had sent the assassins. Yet no one investigated. I stared into the glaring sunlight and thought the world felt more bearable when it was dark. Because killing at night, letting blood seep into the cold darkness, left no trace for anyone to see in daylight. News of the second prince's disappearance quickly spread throughout the capital city. The emperor missed his son so desperately that his hair turned white overnight, and he fell ill in bed. The illness came without warning. The imperial physicians kept watch outside the hall for 5 days and still couldn't find the cause. Of course they couldn't. It was a goo Julian Song had brought back from the southern frontierlands. Gabriel said the goo was meant to take effect days later. But Julian Song couldn't wait. I sat by the table, took a bite of the pastry Serena Ye had sent, and spat it out. Still sickeningly sweet. Serena Ye sat across from me. Her eyes were red, like a rabbit's. It was the first time I'd seen her in 2 months. I didn't know why, but this time she blamed herself terribly, even though none of it was her fault. She had warned me. I was the one who hadn't listened. Now she sat in front of me, hardly daring to breathe. She looked nothing like her usual grinning, mischievous self. Hot pot suits me better, I said, setting the pastry back down. The moment I spoke, Serena Ye's eyes lit up. She nodded. Okay, when do you want it? I looked at the sky slowly darkening and said casually, tonight. After we eat, the weather will change. Everything was under Julian Song's control. All I did was add fuel to the fire. I didn't expect that fire to reach the palace so quickly, to burn all the way to the emperor's bedchamber. They said that when the emperor died, only Julian Song and the eunuch who usually attended him were at the bedside. The edict naming the successor was carried by that eunuch from the bedside straight out of the hall. No one doubted the edict. No one doubted the emperor's cause of death. People only knew that the unremarkable crown prince, the one who always seemed to fade into the background, had smoothly ascended the throne. There was no regicide, no forced abdication, no brothers slaughtering brothers. The night before the coronation, Julian Song lay beside me, his fingers winding a strand of my hair. Luna, where did my second brother go? He looked at me. At last, there was a thin, broken smile in his eyes. I knew that look. Relief. Now that his revenge was complete, I turned and curled into his arms. I sent him to keep my Jier company. Jier? Yes, the courtesy name I gave him. It means purest and kindest. Does it sound nice? Julian Song kissed my hair, his voice hoarse. It does. In the days that followed, Serena Ye and I stayed obediently in the Eastern Palace, waiting for Julian Song to finish the coronation and all the rites, then come for us. By rights, Serena Ye should have been the principal wife and made empress. But she didn't want it. I knew her well by now. When she said she didn't want something, she meant it. Julian Song didn't object. After informing the general, he made Serena Ye a consort, because he wanted to make me empress even more. I didn't learn that until I saw the edict granting Jier the posthumous title of crown prince. That night, after the investiture, rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavier and heavier. That morning, Serena Ye said she would come see me tonight. I hadn't expected she'd even predict the rain. Emperor, tonight, I'm sleeping with Yanran. As Julian Song was about to step into the inner chamber with me, I spoke. He clearly hadn't expected me to say that. He glanced at the room full of red candles and red drapes, then pressed me back against the pillar behind me. Do you know what you're saying? I looped my arms around his neck and blinked at him. Tomorrow I'll apologize properly. When Julian Song left, the veins on his hands stood out. He said, I should have sent her to become a nun. At the hour of high, Serena Ye appeared by my bed. She had already removed her hairpins. Her dark hair spilled down her back, just like the first night she'd run to sleep with me. This time I didn't tell her to get out. I simply shifted outward naturally, so she could slip in on the inside. When thunder cracked, she gently covered my ears, just like all those nights in the past. But this time, something felt different. I told him you're afraid of thunder. After it passed, Serena Ye let go of my ears. She once said she would never tell Julian Song that I was afraid of thunder. If she did, she wouldn't be able to run over and sleep with me. She'd planned it perfectly. With my temperament, I would never tell him myself. I turned to look at her, not understanding what she meant. Luna Lin, I'm going back. Serena Ye looked at me. Her eyes were a little red. She didn't call me princess. She didn't call me consort. She called me Luna Lin. I grabbed her hand. So soon? What if it thunders again later? She suddenly hugged me. Tears spilled onto me. The more she cried, the more shattered she sounded, until my own mind turned to chaos. Luna Lin, I'm going back, she said again. Her palace was only about the time it takes an incense stick to burn, on foot from mine. Yet she spoke as if once she left, I would never see her again. Even though I didn't know what she was crying about, my heart felt soaked through. Stiffly, I held her. Stiffly, I lifted a hand and patted her back. In a small voice I coaxed, if you don't want to go back, then don't. I won't drive you away. Serena Ye cried in my arms for a while, then went quiet. Just when I thought she'd fallen asleep, she lifted her head. Luna Lin, I'm not from this world. She looked at me, her eyes wet. What she said was absurd, yet I believed her. Only then did I understand what she'd meant earlier. I clutched her even tighter. Where are you from? I'm a goddess from the heavens. One day I was bored and picked up a book. I saw you in it and thought, how could there be someone in this world so heartbreaking? She spoke slowly, word by word. Then one day I woke up and found I'd fallen down here. I even became the would-be crown princess who almost died by your hand. I thought, I have to cherish you properly. Now you have Julian Song cherishing you. He loves you so much, he won't let you suffer again. Her words didn't quite fit together. Anyone else would have called it nonsense, but the hand holding hers only tightened. I don't believe you, you're lying to me. I believed her, but I didn't dare to. Serena Ye's eyes reddened further. Goddesses have to go back to the heavens. I leaned in, coldness creeping into my gaze. I don't care what goddess you are, you're not allowed to leave. This time, Serena Ye didn't speak. She looked at me, her eyes full of tenderness and reluctance. You're not allowed to leave. I won't let you, I said softly. Serena Ye let out a small laugh, even as tears slid from her eyes. She lifted the hand I wasn't holding and gently wiped them away. I like you like this. You have to stay like this forever. I didn't want to hear another word from her. If you leave, I'll kill all the maids who serve you. You know I can. You won't. After a while, Serena Ye suddenly said, let me tell you about the book I read. I pressed my lips together, not wanting to answer, yet still wanting to hear her speak. So I turned my head to look at her. She said that in the book, I was an unloved princess of the Kingdom of Lin. I used every means possible to marry Julian Song. But then I met Serena Ye, who married Julian Song as his crown princess. Naturally, I was furious. After the wedding night, Serena Ye came to provoke me, so I set it up and had Gabriel kill her. So that's why you tried so hard to please me? My heart lurched. Those thoughts had indeed crossed my mind. She nodded, then shook her head, and went on. My actions made Julian Song misunderstand me and hate me even more. Yet on the surface, he showed nothing, letting me sink deeper and deeper. Then Vivian Gu appeared. She was like a beam of light at Julian Song's side, pulling him back to shore and helping him climb to that place above everyone. In the book, during the royal hunt, you took an arrow for Julian Song. In the end, you didn't survive. Serena Ye looked at me, her eyes shimmering with tears. When you died, I cried all night. You tried so hard. Your mouth was stubborn, but your heart was soft. Everything you did was just to reach him. Her words landed on my heart like soft blows, making me ache. She reached out and stroked my head. What I feel guilty about is this. When I learned that the baby in your belly took a blow for you and you were safe, I actually cried because I was happy. You have to keep being happy, she whispered by my ear. I held her hand tightly, terrified she would slip away the moment I looked away. To watch her, I didn't sleep all night. In the end, she couldn't help but close her eyes. When she opened them again, those eyes had changed. They weren't Serena Yee's eyes. "Ah, who are you? Someone, come quick," I screamed at the person wearing Serena Yee's face. I leapt off the bed and ran out like a mad woman. I hadn't blinked even once. I'd been holding her the whole time. So how could she be gone? She's gone. When Julian Song came, I grabbed his hand, like it was my only lifeline left. How I wished he would tell me she wasn't gone, that she was only sick, but he drew me gently into his arms. "Luna, you still have me. I only had him." Serena Yee began appearing in front of Julian Song on purpose, and even started turning her schemes on me. Every time I wanted to vent my anger on her, I couldn't when I saw that face. And I wouldn't let Julian Song do anything either. I kept thinking, what if one day when she sleeps, she accidentally falls back down again? If Serena Yee is gone, how will she find me? Because of this, Julian Song punished me in bed more than once. "She blocked my path again today," he said, his face buried in my neck. "She even brought a bowl of white fungus and lotus seed soup." "Did you eat it?" I let out a soft laugh. "I didn't. I came hungry to eat you." His voice was low and rough. Afterward, he stopped me when I tried to drink the soup. I watched him pour it straight onto the floor. He set the bowl back, then pulled me into his arms. "Let's have a child." I knew those medicines wouldn't escape his notice. It seemed Gabriel had fully submitted to him now. Everything was reported to him. I pressed my hand to his chest and told the truth. "I'm afraid." "Don't be afraid. This time, no one can threaten him again." Julian Song held my hand and looked at me with rare seriousness. I swear. In front of me, he never called himself I. At last I smiled. "Okay," I said. "Do you know when we first met? If you guess right, I'll say yes." There was no way he could guess. It wasn't that I didn't want a little one. I just wanted to wait a little longer. But Julian Song kissed my forehead and smiled. "If you want to wait, then I'll guess the day after you married in, when I lifted your bridal veil." "Huh?" I looked up at him. He tapped my nose. He'd done that once before, when I met him at 8 years old. Only that once. "I truly didn't expect that timid little girl from that day would grow into you." When he smiled, it was as if a few stars had been kneaded into his eyes. I froze, then understood. "When did you realize?" I asked. "The scar in your palm is unusual," Julian Song said, lifting his brows. "And the book you carry day and night is unusual too." So it had been that early. Then you... Why didn't you ever say anything? Julian Song's kiss came down, lingering on my lips for a long time before he finally let me go. "Because it didn't matter. What I like is who you are now, proud and unstoppable, and determined to claim me for yourself." His voice was earnest, deep and tender, settling softly into my heart. Maybe Julian Song wanted a child too much. Soon, when the physician came to take my pulse, he announced the good news. That day, Julian Song was so happy he rewarded everyone in the palace. He stared at my belly, smiling like he wasn't the emperor at all. As my belly grew day by day, the fear I'd once carried slowly turned into anticipation. When Julian Song came to see me with a small box, I was asking the physician whether he could tell if the baby was a boy or a girl. "Either way, I'll love them," he said, walking to my side and setting the box down. I smiled and glanced at it. It looked strangely familiar. The pattern on it looked like one used exclusively in the royal palace of the Kingdom of Lin. Julian Song waited until the physician withdrew. Then he pulled me into his arms, picked up the box, and asked me the way I used to ask him. "Guess what's inside?" I couldn't. He opened it, and I saw a delicate set of 9 linked rings. There were traces where it had been broken. In the cracks, faint dried blood still clung. My blood. The year my mother was gravely ill, I ran with the rings to find my father, but fell on the way. The rings shattered, and my hand split open. Julian Song took another small case from Theo. "A gift your father sent for our child." I looked up at him, disbelief filling my eyes. Inside was a deed to a city. Julian Song rested his hand on my belly and said with a smile, Your father sends you a letter every month, and you never read them. Seems he loves you even more than I do. I didn't believe it. Impossible. With Julian Song beside me, I finally unfolded my father's letters, one by one. Each letter began the same way. Is my child well? He wrote that he was useless, that he couldn't protect my mother. For my safety, he could only use that method to stay with me as I grew up. He wrote that he was sorry. I threw every letter into the fire and cried in Julian Song's arms. In that moment, it felt like the stone pressing on my heart had vanished. My whole chest was hollow. All the hatred I'd carried for so many years turned out to be nothing. I leaned against Julian Song and watched the flames lick the letters clean. I forgave him. We no longer owed each other anything. Are you crying? A head popped into view at the opening of the rock garden cave, startling me. I sniffed and bit my lower lip, not daring to speak. Then the boy, red lips, white teeth, jumped straight down from the rockery and walked in. I took 2 steps back without thinking. I knew that if he wanted to do anything to me, it would be useless even if I screamed my throat raw. No one would come to save me here, but the boy didn't do anything. He reached out, took my hand, and led me step by step toward the bright mouth of the cave. Did you do something wrong? He asked as he walked ahead of me. In his white clothes, he looked like a god come down to save me. I shook my head. I was just used to hiding. Then I realized he wouldn't be able to see me from the front, so I stopped. We can dodge, but we can't hide, the boy said, turning back. His brows and eyes were full of youthful pride. My uncle taught me that. It's from this book. Take it and learn. He pulled a book from inside his robes. I still couldn't recognize all the characters, so I simply took it, stunned. My uncle is the Guardian General. He's incredible, he added. He's my hero, my son. I didn't have an uncle. I looked at him and didn't dare say a word. I didn't have a hero, and I didn't have a son. Only endless curses and mockery. Even a stray kitten passing by could bare its teeth at me. Look, the boy said, lifting the kitten. It likes you. The kitten didn't look at him, it stared only at me. He brought it to me. The kitten opened its mouth, and then, in the end, it stuck out its tongue and licked me. What's your name? The boy stuffed the kitten into my arms and tapped my nose. I looked at him the way I might look at the sun. Then someone came calling for him, his uncle. He had to leave. As he ran, he kept turning back to look at me. When he smiled, it was as if his eyes were filled with stars. My name is Julian Song. My name is Lin. A full moon beside the stars. We both belonged to the night. It felt as if we were born to be together.